Salutări tuturor, bine ați venit la Celebrity Talks, seria de podcasturi dedicate personalităților care vizitează Universitatea de Vest din Timișoara. O avem alături de noi pe Nadia Murad, activistă pentru drepturile omului, laureată al premiului Nobel pentru pace și începând de astăzi, Doctor Honoris Causa al Universității de Vest. Nadia Murad, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me.
Timișoara is the European Capital of Culture this year, and obviously people talk a lot about art this year. And my question is, do you know if refugees or people who have experienced severe traumas and art kind of helped them to maybe move on to, in a way it was an experience, a creative experience that maybe helped them to actually move further?
So, right now I'm a student, so I study sociology in American University in Washington DC, and there were it's mostly, sociology is close to the buildings of art, so I've made so many friends from around the world who are studying art and who, their love and passion for art is just something that help them to see and the world, and the way they see the world, they explain it in their way of painting and drawing. And I think that is something sometimes it's not getting a lot of attention because someone can go through a lot, trauma and mental health, and sometimes it's hard to talk about. Not everyone is able to share their story, but some people, and I've heard and I've met people who try to tell their story not in words but through art, and that is really meaningful. And I took a class in it was mostly about art, and we had to look into all the colors and features and explain. And sometimes you just look at something and you're like, it's so beautiful, but there's so much more meaning behind it. And it's just it's so powerful that people can explain their feelings and their experiences through art.
Yes, it definitely is. In Central and Eastern Europe, in the last few years, there were many debates about refugees coming to countries like, for instance, Hungary. It never actually happened. I mean, it did happen, but not so many refugees actually went through or moved to countries like Hungary or even Romania. However, there are many people who are kind of scared of this idea of migrants coming from other countries, migrants that have different cultural backgrounds and so on and so forth. What would you tell them?
Everyone has a story, and so many of them, just like me and my sister, are forced to flee their homes. The number of refugees is more than 110 million around the world. It is a big number, and it is, these numbers represent real people with, families, and they are trying to find somewhere peaceful when they can rebuild their lives. When I and my sister moved to Germany, our situation was a little bit different because the government of Baden-Württemberg decided to take 1,000 survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, specifically from the Yazidi community. But I always say, it's one of the worst injustices that anyone can go through when you're forced to flee everything behind and adapt to a new culture, language, and people. It's not something that people wish, but we have to educate ourselves about who are these people, why the number is growing every single day. Why shouldn't we just, judge them and say that they are coming for our, European social services and to take your jobs and stuff? It's not like that. We have to fix this problem. The number is growing, and I'm afraid that, the international community will run out of humanitarian aid because these people are facing a lot of challenges. And human trafficking, it's happening, as people flee Sudan, Ukraine, Iraq, Syria. I have met refugees in Lithuania who suffered so much while trying to make it to Germany. Traffickers were taking their money and using them for their own interest, but they were left behind in, between Belarus and Lithuania, Greece and Turkey. So it's very complicated, but we have to find a solution. We can't just look at them as people who are coming for fun.
That's true. Of course, I think I can say this. Everybody knows that you're doing excellent work in actually helping so many people in trouble. But I wonder, what can the international community do in order to prevent violence in conflict areas? I know you talk a lot about this. I know you're doing a lot of efforts. But why is it so difficult after all?
Because for so long, impunity has been an option for those who are committing crimes against humanity, and we have to hold them accountable. So with my message and my work at the very beginning, I started talking about accountability. I'm working with my lawyer, Amal Cloney, with survivors, with the community. The international community watched as ISIS took over Iraq and Syria. They posted videos on Facebook, Telegram. They used social media, opening, markets, buying and selling women. And all of this, they were able through that to recruit people from Europe. So many people, thousands of them, women and men, joined ISIS in Iraq and Syria from Europe. And we have cases, we are working on it, we have evidence. And even though with the evidence and testimonies and ISIS being, publicly proud of what they did, it is still very difficult to find the political will to hold them accountable.
It's amazing, and I honestly do not understand why actually politicians do not want to get involved. Do you know maybe any specific examples, maybe off the record, any politician ever told you why is it so difficult? Why do they actually do not want to involve more in changing these horrible situations?
They never have given me that answer, because they always say, we will try. We are not letting them go with what they did, but we go, I go back over and over again, and we're still not being able to convince them. But Germany has done it. 3 ISIS members have been held accountable in Germany, publicly, with transparency, with survivors being, included in the whole process. And we are just telling them, Germany has done it, and I think you can do it too. Because, for example, with Netherlands, there are so many women and men who joined ISIS. And you can't, Iraq, the government, we have a lot of economic problems, security issues, and Iraq cannot, keep them in prison forever. They have to be responsible on their, bringing back their own citizens and question them and hold them accountable if they are responsible.
Can the international community do more if there is a war going on, for instance in Ukraine? I know you already talked about this, about sexual violence in conflict areas. Can they actually involve directly in a conflict area? Is it that even possible? I assume things are very, hard to control already, hard to anticipate. There
are always, in any conflict, there are always signs before the conflict take place, and that is where we need to act, before it is too late. I think in Ukraine we were waiting, just watching the news and saying, the war, it's gonna be next hour, next day. In Sudan, it was the same. In Iraq, ISIS was, they were sharing videos, and all the international community, were seeing all these signs of ISIS taking over Syria and Iraq, but not much was done. And then it is challenging and difficult to convince them to hold them accountable after we felt, to protect people and prevent war. After that, it's even more difficult. We're talking about Iraq and about ISIS, and it's been almost a decade, and only 3 ISIS members have been held accountable, while tens of thousands of people joined. Where are they? Not everyone was killed, ISIS was defeated a few years ago, but the ideology is there. People are still missing in captivity. And when I was in Ukraine in May of this year, I met survivors who went through the same thing as I did, and thousands of them have been sexually abused. And same in Sudan, Taliban is doing the same. Survivors of Boko Haram have, still being held by them. So it's the international community's responsibility to prevent, but when they fail, they have to act and hold them accountable.
If peace would be possible, would you go back to your village to live the same simple and happy, as you said in an interview live, that you lived before the horrible things happened?
Despite the hard circumstances growing up in Iraq, our life was just so simple. I would definitely go back and live with my neighbors and those who have left from the village. But I still go back every year. I was there last month and I met the community. I visit my home every time I go back, even though the village is destroyed. But it was not my fault and my family's fault or my community. It was the fault of those who failed to protect us. And our land, that's why we've been working to make sure that we rebuild the homeland so people can go back. And one day I can take my nieces and nephews and my own children to show them that, we survived and we rebuilt. And I hope that through our work in Sinjar, in the post-conflict, region, we can inspire others in Sudan, in Afghanistan, and even in Ukraine to make sure that we are able to go back and rebuild.
Do you find reasons to be optimistic when talking about peace, when talking about refugees? Do you find reasons to actually hope that things can be better in a reasonable future?
I am always hopeful. I always have hope because even when we were attacked and I was in this dark room surrounded by young girls, I had hope. And with that, I was able to focus my mind on I will make it and I will survive and they will pay the price of what they did to me and my family and my friends. And I think we can't give up hope. When we have hope, we are more determined to move on and to focus on what is good. A lot, is happening in the world, but there are also so many good people who are trying to make the world a better place.
I heard a very nice and beautiful rumor just before our interview. And I want to ask you this. It's a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is it true that maybe we will see you again in Romania? Is it true that maybe you're thinking that Romania can be a vacation destination for you?
That is definitely a yes. I heard things about Romania, but not in details. It's my husband and I, a year ago, we were like, people always go to Germany, France, and we have to go to Romania maybe and just see the culture and everything. And I'm not a winter person. So, I'm from Iraq, so I am hoping that I can come back in the summer because this is a beautiful, historic city with a very rich history. And I'm almost a sociologist, so I love to discover and learn more about other cultures and societies.
Well, what can I say? I hope I'll see you again in June in Timișoara.
Is June the best time?
I think it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm coming back.
Nadia Murad, thank you again for talking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Vă mulțumesc și vouă că ați fost din nou alături de noi. Toate bune și pe curând!